Hey everybody, and welcome back to Storytime with JRP. We're continuing our book, Laurence Grey, Secret of the Lost Roanoke Colony, and we're currently in chapter 34. So if you're just joining us, head back to chapter 1 so you don't miss any crucial details. So a brief recap of chapter 33, Laurence Grey and his son Jason from a different reality are talking in the year 1673 with their forefather, Ben Folger, who's the grandfather of Benjamin Franklin. They learned from Jason that there are two alien sheds in the missing Roanoke colony. One has a big reward, and one has a bunch of weapons that the colonists will use to take over the world. And seeing from a different reality, Jason knows that General Sheldon is going to use those guns to take over the world for himself. So they need to stop him from doing that in this reality. So we're going to continue finding out what happens next in chapter 34, titled Back to the Future. Laurence Grey slapped his hand on his forehead. The Arizona crater? Even your 14-year-old other reality self could think of something better than that. Jason patted his dad's shoulder. It's fine, Dad. Don't worry about it. All that matters is that Sheldon doesn't find the colony. Hopefully, when he figures out this fake clue, finding out that it's a dead end should be enough to stop his search. It's not like he's going to find a clue in the crater. Well, that's true, Grey conceded. I guess we'll just go through the motions. Folger smiled. I'm sure that in a matter of weeks, you'll be a free man again. Grey shook Folger's hand. Thanks for the encouragement. And now I think it's time I head back to my time. It was great meeting you, responded Peter Folger. Jason hugged Grey. And it was so great to see you again, Dad, said Jason, embracing him. It's been so long. Grey arched an eyebrow. Long? You have my counterpart in your reality. Jason suddenly became serious and shook his head. No. In my reality, you died of cancer right as I got out of college. It's the first time I've seen you in, well, over a year. Grey became somber. Perhaps I should stay a while longer. As it is, you're stranded in this time, so... No, it's fine, interrupted Jason. Once you stop Sheldon for good, it will change my reality so that I will never come here. Don't you worry. Now go on, get out of here. Jason's voice had started to edge, and he ran out of the cottage. Grey started after Grey. Son, he cried. Peter Folger stepped up to him. Go after him. Grey raised his eyebrows and said, Really? I was sure you were going to pat my soldier and say comfortingly, Let him go. Folger was silent for a moment, then said, Actually, I was going to say that, but I thought I'd change it up a little, you know? Grey nodded. Yeah, well, you go tell Jason goodbye for me. I've got to get back. Back to the future. Grey pressed the button on the time machine glove on his hand, and away he went. Once again, he was falling through a multicolored swirling vortex. And rematerialized in the secret wing of the Philadelphia FBI base. General Phil Sheldon, a.k.a. Philip Swanson, was walking towards the exit doors. He stopped and turned around at the sound of Grey returning to the present day, 2014. Grey, began Sheldon, I told you to return after the time you left. I did, sir, responded Grey. 8 seconds to be exact. Sheldon grimaced. Is 8 seconds enough to compare notes? You just left. I never get a break around here. Can't you do anything right? Everyone was silent. Sheepishly, Sheldon muttered, Well, welcome back. Then, with no more bravado, added, Well, don't just stand there, man. Write me a report on the double. And with that, General Sheldon marched out of the room. Everyone started to laugh, including Grey. He sat down to write his report. When he finished it, he was escorted to a prison cell, waiting room, where he was told that it also held Jack Larrabee and his son, Jason. The second that prison door opened, Grey ran to his neglected son. It had technically only been a few days since Grey left Nevada's Area 51, but since Grey went back in time to the year 1673, it had technically been 341 years. Grey embraced his son in the biggest hug he'd ever given. Just then, Sheldon walked inside the cell. Okay, reunion's over. He waved around Grey's report. Grey, what's the meaning of this? It's preposterous. Grey sighed. All right, just a moment. Sheldon grunted and left the room. Laurence gripped his son's shoulders. I have to go now, son. And whatever happens, listen to Jack. Be strong and make good choices. I trust you. Grey stood up and walked towards the door. He turned back. I love you, son. I do. And with that, he shut the prison door. He joined Sheldon in the conference room. Why did you bring Jack and Jason out here to Philadelphia? Asked Grey of Sheldon. Sheldon smiled evilly. Just in case you're difficult, I might need leverage. Inside the closed doors of the conference room, Laurence Grey continued his talk with General Sheldon. Grey narrowed his eyes in response to a rather shady comment Sheldon made earlier. What do you mean, leverage? Then it hit Grey what Sheldon was implying. Oh no, General. You wouldn't. Not my son. A beefy hand from Sheldon cut him off. Of course I mean it. I want to see results now, Grey. We've sent you everywhere in time and space, and you're no closer to finding the Roanoke Colony. You're trying my patience. If this preposterous clue you wrote down leads to a dead end, so will one of your companions, if so help me. Sheldon walked to a conference room. Grey, completely shell-shocked by the turn of events, did not reveal his surprise to Sheldon. So, I take it you deciphered the clue, General? Sheldon nodded. Yes, and I bet you did too. Pack your bags. We're taking a trip to the Arizona crater. Quick packing and 8 hours of airtime later, Grey, Jack, Jason, Sheldon, and other agents arrived at the Arizona crater. It was dusk by this point, so the public viewing station was closed. Of course, that wouldn't stop Sheldon, who pulled out a search warrant to show the head security guard. Along with Grey and his companions and Sheldon, Agent Keeler was also in attendance. Even General Farragut joined the group, the guy who initially arrested Grey for breaking into the Area 51 website. Sheldon turned to his group when they reached a gate, which gave them access to the crater itself. Okay, men, we're going to do this rock climbing style. Get out those ropes you brought. I want to search every inch of this crater until you find the next clue. General Farragut, you take Jenkins, Peterson, and Caffrey with you. I'll take the civilians and the FBI agent Keeler. Move out! Grey smiled. He was the only one who knew this trip would turn out fruitless. Around 12 midnight, Grey's prediction came true. Everyone was exhausted, especially since a lot less ground could be covered with only flashlights. Grey wondered if this would end Sheldon's search for good. General Phil Sheldon got out a walkie-talkie and radioed the other half of the search party. General Farragut, this is Sheldon. Did you find anything? The radio crackled as Farragut responded, Nothing, sir. My men even brought infiniscanners, and we still cannot detect anything. Roger, replied Sheldon. Meet me back at the motorcade immediately. Affirmative, affirmed Farragut. I'll be there in 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, the 2 generals, 3 civilians, 3 SWAT guys, and 1 FBI agent convened at the motorcade which had brought them to the Arizona crater. General Sheldon walked up to General Farragut. So you're sure the infiniscanners came up empty? Laurence Grey stepped in. Excuse me, but what are infiniscanners? Sheldon rolled his eyes. They scan everything, obviously. If we were looking for uranium, we type it in, and it scans for that. Grey nodded. Oh, I see. A moment of awkward silence followed. Then Farragut cleared his throat and said, General, as I stated earlier, nothing was found. We've always found something in past alien clues with not too much problem, so I don't see what the issue is here. My only idea is that the clue must be fake. This stunned Grey. He didn't think it would occur to anyone that the clue was fake. However, it was just a guess at this point, so Grey kept a straight face. Sheldon considered this, and then turned to Grey. Grey, is this true? Grey struggled to keep a straight face. Absolutely, sir. I would never lie to you. Sheldon studied Grey for a moment, then suddenly whipped out a gun and grabbed Jason. He pointed the gun at Jason's neck and held him close. I can see in your eyes plain as day, Grey, began a heated Sheldon. I should have known you'd pull a stunt like this. Well, you knew that I warned you before we came here, so you will suffer the consequences. He cocked the gun, and Jason cringed. No! Screamed Grey. Not my only son! Sheldon remained silent for a moment, then smirked. All right, Grey. Have it your way. Sheldon aimed the gun somewhere else and pulled the trigger. A shot rang out, and a body fell. It was Jack Larrabee. No! Wailed Grey as he rushed to his fallen comrade's side. Jack, barely alive, whispered, I am, and I always shall be your friend. And then Jack Larrabee, Grey's best friend, age 47, died. Jack Larrabee is dead. Grey couldn't believe it. Rage boiled within him. First, Sheldon has Grey, Jack, and Jason arrested and kidnapped, then splits Grey off by himself and treats him like a slave, and now he outright kills Jack. Suddenly, Grey had had enough. With a cry of anger and a hint of sadness, Grey leapt from his kneeling position next to Jack and lunged towards Caffrey, a random SWAT officer. Grey grabbed Caffrey's gun and aimed it at Sheldon. Sheldon didn't look fazed at all. You've been a menace to us long enough, Phil Sheldon. growled Grey. Or should I say, Philip Swanson? Sheldon looked shocked, but Grey didn't wait for a response and fired away. He wanted to make sure Sheldon was dead, so he fired that machine gun for 10 seconds straight. But then Grey stopped shooting when he realized the bullets were bouncing right off Sheldon. Sheldon just smirked. Let me introduce you to force field number 4759. Grey couldn't react quick enough, and the SWAT guys pulled handcuffs on him. Sheldon walked up to Grey. I could have someone else do this, but I wanted to have the pleasure of it for myself. And with that, Sheldon slammed his fist into Grey's face, one of the hardest punches in Grey's life. Grey quickly went unconscious. When Grey woke up, he and Sheldon were apparently back in the conference room at Area 51 in Nevada. Good, you're awake, began Sheldon. Now that you've added attempted murder of a civil officer to your many charges, you have one last chance to find the Roanoke Colony. Sheldon turned on a TV, the TV displaying none other than Jason, sitting in a moderately sized empty white room. We've put your son Jason in this empty room, or, to be more specific, this airlock. You have 24 hours to find the colony, or we'll suck all the air out of that room and the life out of your son. Grey lunged for Sheldon, the latter leaping backwards. Too much time on your hands, Grey? All right, if you insist. Let's make it 12 hours. No! Yelled Grey in anguish. Sheldon just laughed. A guard would be here to take you to your room shortly. I'd get on that job quick if I were you. Grey was silent. First Jack, then in 12 hours, possibly Jason. 12 hours, or Jason dies. And Grey had nothing. No clues, no leads, no possibilities. And when, no, if they killed Jason, what then? Would Grey continue searching for the Roanoke Colony forever? Or would Sheldon give up and release him? The latter? Not likely. Well, despite having nothing to go on, Grey began his investigation. There were only 2 previous clues, one that led to the sewers of Philadelphia, and the other which led to Peter Folger in 1673. Grey knew Folger had the clue, but at the time did not want to hear it, just in case he was submitted to a lie detector test by Sheldon. Grey knew it all came down to one fatal choice, the life of his only son, or certain war, and the deaths of countless others. Grey thought about it for a moment, then mentally chastised himself. He would not give his only son up, especially since his wife, Denise, died only a year ago, and his best friend was murdered an hour ago. Grey's only choice is to go back to 1673 and ask Folger for the clue. Folger wouldn't like it, and neither would the other older Jason, but it had to be done. The other potential casualties would have to take care of themselves. Grey explained the situation to Sheldon, but changed the story so it seemed like Grey forgot what the clue said, rather than purposely avoiding it so Sheldon wouldn't find out. He hoped that Sheldon would forget that he mentioned Sheldon's real name at the Arizona crater. Grey wanted to hold on to that bit of information to use as leverage when the need for leverage arose. Grey put on the time machine glove once again and prepared to head back to 1673. He was excited about going back in time because since he could return to this time the exact second he left, he would not lose any of the 12 hours. And it would give him a chance to talk more with the alternate reality older Jason. Grey knew there was a chance that he might never see his son again at his age of 14. He pressed a button, and away he went to 1673. For the third time, Grey fell through a swirling multicolor vortex. He began to lose consciousness, but as Grey's vision faded away, he was thinking one thing. This was his only chance to save Jason. This time around, Grey materialized in a massive cornfield, which he assumed belonged to Peter Folger. He got up from his position on the ground and began a half-mile walk through the cornfield in the direction of a cottage that Grey also recognized as Folger's. A few minutes later, he knocked on the door of the cottage. Folger answered the door, then looked up in surprise. Why, Laurence Grey, you're back! After you left 6 months ago, I was sure you would never return. Come inside, let's talk. Grey thanked Folger and stepped inside. Jason is visiting today, said Folger. I mean, the one from what you call an alternate reality. Grey nodded. Oh, that's good. And I thought it had only been a few days since I left here, not 6 months. Folger shrugged. It certainly has been that long, Grey. What time did you put into your time machine? Grey shrugged. Just 1673. Folger nodded. Thought so. It had to pick a month and a day, so it probably picked one at random. Grey smiled. You act like you know all about future things. Folger winked. Jason tells me a lot. Just then, Jason walked in. Seeing Gray, he smiled. Hey, alternate reality dad, you're back. Gray nodded. Yes, and I have an important question to ask Mr. Folger here. Jason nodded and sat down in the living room. Folger and Gray followed and sat down as well. Gray took a deep breath, then began. Okay, you're not going to like this, but it's a life or death situation. Folger grinned. Go ahead, my boy. Gray cleared his throat. I'm going to need to ask you for that next alien clue. Immediately, Folger and Jason stood up. Folger first. I believe we discussed this already. If we tell you the clue, Sheldon will find out, and that will lead to World War III. Jason backed Folger up. Yeah, telling you will lead to millions of lives lost. Gray shook his head. Everyone will just have to be responsible for themselves. I need it, Folger responded. But why, Laurence? Gray shrugged. I can't tell you. Jason raised his voice. How could this one person be any more important than half the world's population? It can't be that important. That was the last straw for Gray, who said, in less than 12 hours, someone who is going to get suffocated and die. Who? Yelled Jason. You! Screamed Gray. Jason suddenly became very silent. Gray continued. Your other reality self. And if he dies, so do you. Haven't you seen Back to the Future? That wasn't in the movie, stepped in Folger. Laurence grimaced. Jason, how much do you tell this guy? Jason didn't laugh and remained serious. This is a tough one, Folger. Are we going to let him have the clue? Or are we... Folger did a double facepalm and sighed. No, Jason, we won't let you die. Folger walked over to Gray and whispered, Can I speak to you in private, Gray? Laurence nodded, and they walked into the other room. There was a desk in there with a chair on either side. Sit down, Gray, said Folger as he shut the study room door. He walked to the other side of the desk and sat down as well. Gray, Folger began, I have to tell you, I'm not at all for giving you the clue. Gray raised an eyebrow. Yes, I believe we established that. Folger sighed. And my reasons are the same as I earlier stated, except a few changes based on the information you provided me. Gray sat up in his seat. Explain. Folger steepled his fingers. This may be hard for you to hear, but it would be in the best interest of humanity to let your son die. Gray jumped up. Just a minute. Oh, hold on. I'm not finished yet, Gray, interrupted Folger. Gray held up a stony silence. With a deep breath, Folger continued. It's just that, to be frank, your son started all this. He's the one who came back in time, and Swanson stole the machine and became General Sheldon. Then that would lead to World War III. So if Jason dies, Swanson wouldn't steal the time machine, and the timeline would be restored. World War III would never happen, at least not because of Sheldon and the Roanoke Colony. Billions of lives would be saved. Gray swallowed hard. I just lost my best friend yesterday to Sheldon. I can't lose my son. Folger gave Gray a slip of paper. Here's the clue. You make the decision. Gray left the cottage with a fatal choice to make. Save his son or the world. Wow, what a conundrum. Gray has to choose between his son and the world. What's more important to him? What decision will he make? And now also we have longer chapters, guys, so you can hear a little bit more every time we read. Well, you're just going to have to find out what happens next in tomorrow's chapter, guys. All right, I'll see you then.